I told you it'd be awkward.
Welcome to the world-famous Adventurers Club. I'm Craig Carroll, member number 1230. Over the past 101 years, through war, famine, and now pandemics, we have met nearly every Thursday evening to celebrate those who venture far, far off the beaten path. It is in that spirit this evening that I introduce to you an amazing explorer who defines the very definition of traveling off the beaten path in the spirit of adventure. Please welcome Comrie-Picard. So Andrew, quite a fascinating life. I obviously want to talk about the global expedition, but I'd sort of like to set it up and how did it all begin? And we had a really interesting conversation about a 7-year-old living in Alberta, Canada. Maybe we could take it from there.
Yeah, sure. So people ask me sometimes, because I got into car racing and then movie stunts and now expeditioning, how it all started, and I've had to think long and hard about it, and it really started like in a field in rural Alberta, Canada, where I grew up, because I was an only child and I just had stuff to mess around with, dirt bikes and dune buggies and snowmobiles, and I just started messing around with them and breaking them and fixing them and rolling them, and to your point, I rolled my dad's pickup truck at age 7. So that's my beginning claim to fame. My first movie stunt, I was in the field, and my dad looked at me and said, well, there's the welder, you'll have to figure out how to fix her. And
now, was it a stick shift or an automatic?
That was a stick shift.
Because that's pretty impressive that a 7-year-old could work the clutch and see where he was going, or maybe that was the problem.
I was tall, but yeah, it was a field. How wrong could it go? Well, now you know.
And how did you roll it? I mean, it was a field.
It was muddy, and I hooked it in a groove, and now I know. I raced cars for a long time. I know what I did now, but then it was new to me. That's how you learn. You mess things up. Cover your ears, kids.
And so was your dad mechanical? Like, did he teach you? Like, I can tell you that my 7-year-old could not have welded a car back together.
Yeah, well, I couldn't weld it together at 7 either, but that's how you learn. You do it bad for a while, and then you get better, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, it's better if you do it that way. You should clean it first, for example. Clean the paint off, then it welds better. No, it's just, I think that it's one of the things actually we try to do with our kids, to give them enough space to play and mess up, and that's how you learn stuff, just trial and error, because you can tell people how to do things, but the better thing to do is let them do stuff, and then, maybe bump the rudder a little bit. And I didn't get, my parents were lovely, but I didn't get a lot of rudder bumping. I was kind of just out there messing around, and it helped.
And have your daughters rolled any vehicles yet? Any pickup trucks?
No, it's funny. It's funny, right? Because you get to a certain age, and now I've done a lot of dumb stuff with cars and all kinds of stuff. But now Rosie actually jumped off the front of the house with the wings she'd built herself, and I totally support it. Yeah, totally support it. But I'm like, let's get you a little mattress for that or something. Now something to fall.
You better watch out. They have something called Child Protective Services.
I know. They've come once or twice already.
So I have to say that I don't think of Alberta, Canada as a bastion of stunt driving, actors. It's a little bit of a disconnect.
Yeah, well, and that's true. And my wife and I are both Canadian, although we met here. But all I wanted to be when I was 12 years old was a race car driver and an actor. And nobody I'd ever met or ever seen had done either of those things. It was impossible. So I just, I messed around with the trucks and things in the fields and just sort of did what I wanted to there. But I didn't think it was realistic, so I went to school and I studied for a while, and then
you went to a lot of school.
Yeah. And then I got a job, and I raced throughout, but that job allowed me to buy a better race car.
Wait a minute, you went to school, you got 5 degrees. I feel like you're glossing over a really interesting story, because I have no degrees, so you should really give me one. Yeah. So how did you, what are your 5 degrees in?
I did an undergraduate degree at the University of Toronto in philosophy of science. I started out in pure physics, and then I got into theoretical physics, and then I moved into philosophy of science.
U of T, by the way, the Harvard of the North, correct?
Thank you. Well, thank you, Japan. Well,
that's what my Canadian wife told me, at least.
Yep, well, good. Yeah, so we have several Harvards up there, relatively speaking. But but I really enjoyed that. I got to sort of, I was interested in physics, but then I became more interested in the theory of science. And then I went on to a completely unrelated set of degrees. I did a law degree and an MBA, and then I went and did a graduate degree in England in political economy.
So that's 4. There's a 5th in there.
I got 2 in England. I got a bonus one in England, actually. Yeah, they throw an extra one in. It's kind of once you're paying the fee. No, it's actually it's Oxford University. And the funny thing about Oxford and Cambridge is that if you, well, I went over and did what's called a second BA. So if you've already done a BA or a BSc, you get a bonus year off of your next one. So I went and did another one at Oxford. And then if you, and this is very old school, literally, after 21 semesters, like 7 years, that you're then just deemed to be a master and you get a master's degree. So it's a pretty good deal because then you're allowed to go back and teach, or that was the thing in the day. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I didn't, arguably, if I'd stayed in any one of these disciplines, maybe I would have gone further, but I've enjoyed the mashup of all of them. And when we talk about the expeditioning and stuff, everything dovetails together. Everything you do, kids, ends up being important somehow.
And I'm not sure that I want you teaching my kids, because you're pretty radical. Like, I'm not sure if my kid needs any Andrew Picard in his life. So, but tell me, while you were at Oxford, you started rally car racing, which I'm fascinated by. Like, most kids are just going to the pub on the weekends, but you, no pubs.
Yeah, well, I'd always, it was a natural extension of the kind of stuff I was into in terms of racing. I actually am not very competitive. I don't want to beat other people, but I like challenges, and that kind of informs all this stuff that we're talking about. That and probably because I just grew up in a field with a dune buggy or a snowmobile, I just wanted to challenge myself. I wonder if I can get up that hill, or I wonder if I can do this thing. So I ended up in rally racing, which is, it's a little like golf. You're timed through sections, and then those times are totaled up, and you compare your times with other people. That's what rally racing is like. But I always say we're really out there battling Mother Nature. We're only incidentally battling each other because you're really just trying to get the best line through. And you're using like country logging roads, dirt roads, and we say real cars, real roads, real fast. I'll show you some pictures when we get to some pictures.
And you have a co-pilot that's doing the navigation?
Yeah, co-driver we call them. And we go through the course ahead of time. I dictate a set of shorthand notes that describe the course, the severity of the corners, the bumps, the jumps, and so on. And then they read it back to me. We get to go through a couple of times and test it. And then in race day, you do that at 120 miles an hour.
Are you using hand signals or audible?
You're using audible with helmets with headsets in them until that headset fails. And then you're using whatever hand waving you possibly can to, and we've had some exciting ones there. But no, when you've got it down right, you actually have this incredibly calm kind of science. And it's a little like Tetris, as your co-driver saying, left 4, and I always had often had an English co-driver, left 4, mid-right over crest, right 5+ into left 6. And it's just like Tetris. They just like start coming at you. Like, okay, I got to set up for this one, I got to downshift for that one, I got to set up the car that way.
How come every car we see is upside down? Like, I'm a little.
We should probably go back to the beginning, and then because they kind of go in order. Yeah, I mean, it turns out I got into putting cars upside down. That's me stunt coordinating a stunt on a movie. But basically, extreme stuff with vehicles became my thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then you became a lawyer in New York City, which I say is a long cry from rally car racing on logging roads.
There's a lot of crying, yeah. Yeah, it is. So I didn't think it was realistic to be a car racer. So I I had gotten a good degree, and
well, you got several of them, but you've
right. But I got one good enough to get hired at a New York law firm, and
not just any law firm, like a white shoe law firm.
One of the Paul Weiss, one of the classics, and not only that, but I went into commercial law there. But then I got pulled into the entertainment division, so it should have been the best law job ever. I mean, I had celebrities as clients. I had a Victoria's Secret model as a client. I launched her clothing line, but ultimately I learned I was on the wrong side of my own desk. I didn't like papering people's deals. I wanted to be out doing stuff, and it was diabolically hard for me in the end. When I left, so the racing, the money allowed me to finance the racing more, and then the racing became successful.
So you kept racing, like so you would be a legal beagle during the week, and then a racer on the weekend.
Yeah, and that became untenable fast because
well, you're coming back exhausted Monday morning too, like probably with dirt caked in your face still.
Yeah, well, I came back enervated, excited, but the problem was just the time. I mean, you'd get a call on Friday, and everybody would blow out their weekend and change all their plans and stay into work, and I was like, I can't do it this weekend because I got a thing, and so I eventually left, and I said I'll take a year off. The partner said you'll be back. But other associates came up and shook my hand and secretly said go man, get out of here.
Get out.
I was going to be a hockey player. I was going to be an X. I was going to be a Y. And so many dreams were crushed here. So I did escape, and it would have been somebody would have died if I hadn't left anyway. But it worked out, and I never looked back. Really, and it's one of those things where you go through one door, then you find a next door that you didn't even know existed opens, and one thing led to another.
So where did you go from there?
Well, once I went pro racing for pro rally racing, that led me into different types of racing, and I ended up pro drift racing and off-road racing.
X Games.
Yeah, and then competed at the X Games. I got some pictures of that we can show. But then that brought me out here. I was driving for a team in California. Even though I'm Canadian, I had a visa to work down here. And then I met some of the producers for some TV shows. I had hosted a show in Canada. So when I first went to leave the law firm, I suddenly was a little bit underemployed because racing wasn't really quite a full-time job yet. So there was a casting, this is early 2000s, so there was a casting notice I saw for, can you build, early like Jesse James days of reality TV, like, can you build a car in 3 days? And I'm pretty good at building cars, but I had a team of 6 mechanics who could like weld upside down in the snow and put my car back together, right? And I kind of wanted to get them something, on TV or get them something to do, right? And so I called up this production company in Canada and said, I got these guys, they should be on your show. And we pretty quickly got them cast. And then I said, well, but what are you going to do when some mechanic says, yeah, we're going to put 410s in it? Like, who's going to say, so you're going to change the rear axle gearing ratio to make it accelerate faster? And there was a long silence, and they said, well, how about you?
They're like, what does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. So I ended up hosting the show on Global TV in Canada, a car build show called, that was War of the Wheels. And then, so I was hosting that, and then I came to California, and then I ended up landing a Discovery show. So I hosted a show on Discovery Channel with Chip Foose. We coached people to build cars. They built them. He judged the aesthetic builds. A guy named Lee Santiago and I judged the mechanical builds. We tested them. We made cars into boats and made them fly. Oh, we turned cars into airplanes, actually. It was fun.
And what was it called?
Yeah, that was called Ultimate Car Build-Off on Discovery Channel. And then those producers ended up going on to produce Top Gear USA. So then I ended up being a producer and a writer on Top Gear USA and a stuntman on Top Gear USA. And that got me into TV and movie stunts. And one thing led to another. And then since then I've done, well, there's me doing Top Gear stunts right there. That is a real bullfighter, the only real bullfighter that lives in North America. The Top Gear people said to me, can you, because all Lamborghinis are named after bulls. So they had this idea that let's build a bull ring and have you fight with a bullfighter with a car, and we'll morph the bull into a Lamborghini. And so they said, yeah, we got a Murcielago SV670, I think it was, which is there it is. It's at that time it was a $480,000 brand new Lamborghini off the trailer from Lamborghini.
On the dirt.
Yeah, exactly.
That's got to be good for the paint.
We have red camera footage of like slow-mo, the spokes of these carbon fiber wheels throwing up rocks. It's awesome. And they said, yeah, can you drift in a bull ring with a bullfighter? And that was actually a real highlight, because afterwards the bullfighter said, he stood there. I went past him at 60 miles an hour, and he didn't step back, and his cape swept all the dust off the windshield. and he said, at the end, I couldn't believe he didn't flinch. Like, you could see the tire track in the ground, and his footprint were like that far apart. And he said, he shook my hand and said, it has been a great pleasure working with you. You're a true professional. And I'm like, dude, you're a bullfighter. You didn't flinch, man.
Yeah, you're in the car.
Yeah, it's like, if I hit you, I'm sorry. Anyway, it was a great experience. And I got one thing led to another, and then I went on to Fast and Furious and Deadpool. For Deadpool, they called and said, hey, do you think you could drift an Oshkosh? Which is like if you might know what an Oshkosh is, it's like an 8-wheeled military transport vehicle. I think it carries an Exocet missile or something, like big stuff.
And how much does it weigh?
I think about 20 tons, like 40,000 pounds.
And had anybody drifted one before?
Not to anybody's knowledge, no. And it's like 16 turns long to lock in this hydraulic steering, a big V16 twin turbo diesel engine. And so I said, probably.
And how do you break the wheels loose of something like that?
Oh, interesting question, yeah. Nobody knew. There's no handbrake or anything. So there's a military supply surplus place up in Santa Clarita that supplies a lot of the movies that do this kind of stuff, and this was for Deadpool. So I went up there, and the guy said, oh, you're the guy who's trying this thing out? Okay, there it is. And they backed away, and there's like a dirt road and an Oshkosh. I'm like, I said, how does this thing work anyway? But I did it. We did it. And we demoed it, and it worked, and the producers loved it. And then we got to downtown Vancouver on the tarmac, and they said, no, it's too scary. We're not going to do it after all. We'll put it in post. So we didn't do it. But they, for me, that's super exciting. Like, if you give me a new vehicle and a new challenge, and I'm a 12-year-old in the field again,
a 7-year-old with a stick shift.
Yeah, well, by 12, I wasn't rolling them as often.
So you kind of glossed over Fast and Furious, but that's a big franchise.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't do all of them. I did. You can see me in Hobbs and Shaw, where, amongst other things, I slide vehicles into places, and I'm a bad guy and stuff. But then I have to fight like a 7.5-foot tall Samoan, which is a funny moment. because I fight like this. Yeah, I need some coaching from other people. I'm good with cars, but I'd previously done Atomic Blonde, and the fight coordinator was the same fight coordinator in the 2 movies. And so he's like, ACP, yeah, you were on Atomic Blonde, go fight that Samoan. And I'm like, no, that's a terrible idea. There's a couple of other because they're interesting in the stunt industry that it used to be, like all stuntmen can crash cars because they all have driver's licenses. Well, most of them do. But anybody can hit a wall, right? But
you got to look good doing it.
Yeah, that's right. But I kind of specialize in close misses. And what happened is probably about, 15 years ago now, they found that there was this pool of drift drivers, rally drivers who were really good at making cars. We say acting with cars, and we didn't dive the nose or swerve back and forth or the English that you put on a car to slide underneath the trailer or something. So it's become a specialized subset of stunt work that there are specialist stunt drivers. So on Atomic Blonde, if you saw that, I actually went to Hungary as specifically the precision stunt driver. And so they had a car set up with controls in the back seat, where I have a second steering wheel and pedals, and we had to do like a reverse 180 down a narrow alley, and Charlize Theron is sitting in the seat in front of me, and like giggling while I'm like driving the car around, which is a good day at my work, it's a good day.
They pay you for that.
I know, right? Yes, and they should, but I do it anyway. It's really satisfying because for me, any challenge, like in that case, they're putting the big insurance asset for the movie in the car with me and saying, okay, so do a reverse 180, and the Steadicam operator is going to step into it as it comes around. I'm like, great, where's he going to step to? And they're like, can you step here? I'm like, sure, make him step there, and I'll bring the car here. And then if I can do it, as I usually can, thankfully, then that's a good day. And then other people are amazed, and I walk away happy.
And how fast are you going in reverse?
Well, it depends. A good reverse 180, Craig, it depends on the car and the day. But, at 15 miles an hour, if you put enough English on it, it'll do it. But you probably want to go 25.
Yeah. So I got to think you've probably had some close calls over the years. Is there anything? I mean, look, obviously Ken Block recently passed on. Amazing driver, died in a snowmobile accident, who I believe you knew very well, right? Didn't you race with him on the X Games?
Yeah, we did. I did the first 5 X Games that had cars in them were me, Travis Pastrana, Ken Block, and a guy named Tanner Faust, who ended up hosting on Top Gear too. And yeah, Ken and I weren't close friends, but we raced together for more than a decade, and we were friendly. We saw each other all the time.
It's a dangerous business you're in.
Yeah, I mean, Ken, it was a snowmobile accident in Utah not too long ago, and nobody thought Ken would be the guy to go. Travis Pastrana does stupid stuff every week, and somehow he's built of rubber, and it's okay. He taught me to backflip a motorcycle at his house. I backflipped into his foam pit, and there's a longer story to that. Actually, that was a disaster, but I was on Nitro Circus for it, so that was a good upside.
Nitro Circus is their traveling show, right? Their traveling motocross show.
It's now traveling. It used to be. It was an early YouTube. It was an early actually it was on television. It was an early series, right? Where basically this bunch of dumb guys did dumb stuff all the time. But I mean, in its own way, it was excellence. Like they kept pushing themselves to do harder and harder things. The first backflip, first double backflip, first front flip, and I was there for because it was the early days of X Games. So I was there for a lot of it.
I actually shot some of the Crusty Demons of Dirt series, if you remember that. Not to date myself, but that was the very first film that kicked off. That was before Nitro Circus started. That was what really sort of created it all.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'll look that up. Yeah, it's
a classic. I like to say.
Yeah, classic in the annals of
all right, so you must have had some close calls. So just share, just so people have a perspective of what it's like to be a stunt driver.
Well, yeah, I mean, you want it to be the margin between close call and a really bad day is the most narrow. Like you want it to look as absolutely as dangerous as possible. Mm-hmm. I've been lucky to not have any real disasters. I mean, that one in the picture there, I stunt coordinated that. It was a small film in Vegas. It's not out yet. But the guys said, okay, we want to flip a cop car at the end of the chase scene, so I built, I designed the ramp, built the ramp, got the drivers, coordinated it, and lined it all up, and I said, okay, put the cameras here, here, and there, and we're going to move all the people out here for safety and all that, and then action. and they wanted the car to land underneath that building is an old deserted hotel, but there's an awning underneath. And I'm like, I think I can make it land there. So put the A-cam on the sticks right there. And it was an expensive camera. And
was being the opposite.
yeah, well, I mean, to put in perspective, it was right about where that guy in the red jacket was standing. So the shot is unbelievable, right? But we nearly ate like $200,000 a camera or something. So, it's still a good day. It was not quite in focus. That was not perfect. But I've been lucky. I've had a few. Oh, I've had a good one on Top Gear. When the Aston Martin Vantage V8 and V12 convertible launched, nice car, a few $100,000, $280,000, I think. We were doing a thing. We're doing all these. We're doing a James Bond thing. So I'm drifting it through the old steel mill at Fontana, and. It's always the last shot of the day, and they're like, okay, we're gonna get one more. We're gonna do this crossing shot, through the pipes and all the stacked pipes. It's gonna be really cool. And I was relatively early in my stunt driving career. This is 15 years ago now, or at least. And this is an oncoming shot. The camera car, an arm car, used to be called a Russian arm car. We've changed it to a Ukrainian arm car. That has a camera mounted on a gimbal and a big controllable arm. We've got 5 guys in the vehicle that are controlling the camera in different ways. And I didn't really know there are extremely reputable arm car companies. I didn't know these guys that well. They were fairly new. But the director I knew really well. He directed a lot of Top Gear and so on. And so we're coming at each other, and the camera's going to be on the deck, and then it's going to come over the car as I go, right? And it's like we're losing light. It's magic hour, last shot of the day. And they're like, and there's a moment, and again, I was fairly junior. I'm like, I just wanted to say, can we just rehearse this first? And I got on the radar, and I did say to the director, I'm like, should we? He's like, no, we gotta go. I'm like, okay. And so, we agreed on the crossing speeds. I think I was going 40 miles an hour, and they were coming at me at 30 or something. But that's a closing speed of 70 miles an hour, maybe 60. And but there's nowhere to go. There's stacked pipes on both sides, so there's nowhere to dive out. It's a perfect storm. And as I'm coming up, and we're still like 15 car lengths away, and I saw the cameras just starting to come off the deck, I realized it's not going to make it up in time. There's no way. And so and on gravel or on dirt, you have really bad braking with any car. But I used a bunch of rally techniques, and I started slewing it sideways and trying to slow it down. I can't go into their path of moving, because otherwise we're going to head on with a Mercedes SUV with a camera on it. So I start like sliding in and moving it around and trying to slow it down. And I slow it down some, and the camera starts coming up. I can still see it in slow motion now that I'm talking about it. I see the camera coming up, and it just misses the front of the hood of the car. And I'm still trying to brake, and I'm like leaning back in the seat. It's coming so close to me. And it just misses the windshield. Maybe we're going to make it. And it hits the roof right at the top of the windshield. Peels the roof back, peels the camera off the arm, and it's a complete disaster. And then there's a big insurance claim, right? But I narrowly missed getting a camera in my jaw.
Yeah.
So that was good.
Were you wearing a helmet?
What? No. Yeah. You didn't think you'd need to.
Yeah.
This isn't stunt work in the sense of like I'm not doing a reverse 180. Well, we didn't have helmets on then either. But anyway, I was self-critical. What should I have done? Did I do anything wrong? And I called up a stunt driver a very experienced stunt driver that I knew, and he said, no. First thing you had to do is jump out of the car and say, what the heck was that? What happened, everybody? You guys all screwed up. But throw the blame away. But I did get out of the car and went straight to the director and said, hey, I did everything. No, it's not your fault. It's their fault. It's their fault. Okay.
So what was the problem? They weren't coming up fast enough?
They didn't pick up fast enough. And he was in the car saying, up, and they didn't pick it up fast enough.
Got it.
And it's hard, though, because your eyes are in the lens. Anybody who works in the business, you're looking through the lens, and it's really hard to have that perspective.
And you're like, what a great shot.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, he's coming. Oh, he's really coming. That came off faster than I thought. So, it's like anything. It's the same thing. If you start rolling trucks when you're 7, you can put Charlize and throw it in your car and hopefully not roll it then.
Yeah.
The more of this stuff you do, because you don't get to have a lot of experience. We should probably talk about the expedition at some point too. But like you don't get to. You need the experience in order to land it on the day that it matters, right? And that's the real story. Is that you need your 10,000 hours, and I only had 9,000 at that point. So.
I want you to drive my truck around the neighborhood a little before we leave. Let's have a couple more scotches before we do that.
Okay.
All right, so let's talk about the expedition, because the expedition is fascinating. I have to say I've never heard anything like this. Like, how did you come up with this idea?
Well, I can't claim it to be entirely my idea. So
The Trans-Global Car Expedition, right?
Correct,
That's
yeah.
the official name?
Yeah. So as I was aging out of rally racing. So I was lucky to have had good sponsors. I won the North American Rally Championship. I competed at the X Games. I eventually won a medal there. I was like, things had really come a long way. And then I met my wife. That's about 10, 11 years ago now. And I started to sort of move the racing down. And I started thinking, we talked about it too, what's the hardest thing you could possibly do with a vehicle? And nobody has ever driven, to this date, people have talked about they've driven, pole to pole or end to end or whatever, road's end to road's end, but nobody's driven from one of the Earth's poles to the other. It's never been done, completely on the surface, right? And so about 10 years ago, I started pitching this to, and I'd worked already with Netflix and Discovery and other networks for short series, and I've worked with auto manufacturers, so I was pitching it to them, and we couldn't quite get the money together. It was going to be $7 million, and somebody could put some money in, somebody could put some money in, but we never quite got it over the line. And then I got busy with other stuff and movie stunts, and I started another business, and I kind of put it on the back burner. But in the process, and we're totally off any slides, but there's Emil Grimson will come up here. I had worked with Top Gear. There's a company in Iceland. Turns out all the best people for driving on glaciers in the world are in Iceland, because they have a glacier that they can drive on all year. Right? And so you see these vehicles with 44-inch flotation tires. There's Emil right there. Thank you. That guy is Emil Grimson. That's very near to the South Pole. The Icelandic guys get very good at driving on glaciers, so they become the guys who supply the vehicles that go to Antarctica to support all the other expeditions. When Prince Harry skis to the South Pole for wounded warriors, the Arctic trucks support it. They've done 370,000 kilometers on the Antarctic continent, right? With these balloon tire trucks.
Now, I didn't know you could drive on glaciers. I mean, it seems insane.
I once, in Iceland, I got out of a Toyota Hilux on these 44-inch flotation tires at about 3 PSI. You can drive over your own arm. That's how low the pressure is.
And so explain what a flotation tire is.
Phoebe, can you forward a couple of slides to, let's go through some, and there's a good picture.
Because this is fascinating. So I four-wheel drive at 17 PSI, not 3 PSI.
Okay, keep going. There'll be a vehicle here in a second. We're going to get to skip over the video. Basically, this one. So you see those tires, they're 44 inches tall. If you look carefully, that front tire is squished like a balloon, right? And what you do is deflate these tires down, and we have an onboard central tire inflation system, and we can deflate them as necessary to go down to 3, 4 PSI, even lower.
Which you invented, correct?
Well, no.
You were part of inventing?
Well, the military has had this for a long time. We have an on-road version for these vehicles that we've helped innovate, yes. But the key is that you need it to be kind of idiot-proof. You need to be able to set the pressure, and then you're concentrating on the driving, and we'll talk about that. Yeah, there's another one of the trucks that we use in the Arctic. And you see the tires look like they're flat, but the point is they're like almost flat. So I was driving one in a glacier in Iceland, and I got out, and I sunk up to my hips in snow. We were on 10 meters of snow on 100 meters of ice. But you couldn't, if you put your legs down, your whole body just went in. And the Icelandics are really good at knowing different types of snow and all that. So that is how the vehicles crisscross Antarctica. So I had met Emil Grimson, who'd worked with Top Gear, who founded Arctic Trucks 30 years ago, had worked with Top Gear on their North Pole expedition. And so I started, thank you, Phoebe, we'd already talked about my pole-to-pole expedition. He called about 3 years ago and said, Andrew, your idea for pole-to-pole, someone's going to do it. And I'm like, I knew it. But you should talk to him. And I did. And that guy is Vasily Shagnovsky. There, this guy.
The Russian.
Yeah. He's not the only Russian, but yeah. So he is a very interesting guy, a successful businessman who left Russia actually quite a long time ago. But he is now...
And he's the climber, right? He's summited like 10 or 14 of the highest peaks?
Yes, right? Yeah. He is a very serious climber, has summited Everest, and has just become a long-time explorer. There's another guy who I'll talk about, another Vasily, who is a ridiculous climber. But he's just become an adventurer of the highest order. And he, after summiting all the 7 summits and so on, said, well, what's the next thing I can do? I would like to go around the world through both poles in a vehicle. Okay. And he with a man named Alex Safanoff and Sergey Larin, who is the president of the Seven Summits Club.
Can you explain what the Seven Summits Club is?
It's just an institution of people, and I think it's loosely associated, who have summited the 7 highest peaks on the highest peaks on each of the 7 continents.
We have the only Iranian to ever do it coming in I think about 2 months. A doctor of some sorts, and she's a woman, but is the only Iranian who's ever done the 7 Summits. So I'll have to ask her if she's in the club.
Yeah, well I presume she could if she's qualified. I mean, basically, when you start to exhaust these kind of,
you run out of summits.
Right, yeah, so what are we going to do now? So we came up with a similar thing. My idea was just to go from the South Pole to the North Pole, including through the Darien jungle, which we can talk about. But now, here, thank you, Phoebe.
Yeah, can you explain kind of what the trip looks like?
Yeah, so in January of 2024, we'll start from New York City and go to the North Pole overland.
New York City, by the way, I never think of, I'm a New Yorker, so I don't think of it as a great exploratory jumping off point. So maybe you can explain why New York City. Right. I mean, it's plenty dangerous, and maybe you do need to have your tires at 3 PSI. But Square, yeah. It's because there's an automotive history also. The 1908 round the world race started from New York. It was a big place of early automotive challenges and so on. And just from a media perspective and from a sort of global awareness perspective, I think it's a good place to start. We have to start somewhere in the Americas anyway. You have to do this south to north to south. You have to go around this way just for the seasons. And the timing works out pretty well for us. So it's going to be from New York. So when you say the seasons, when do you start and why?
So the two things, of course, you have to cross Antarctica in the warmest months, right? So you want to be there like December and touching into January. And you have to do the Arctic in just when the sun starts to come up, which is now, basically, and just after now. And you have to get out of there by about April 10th when the ice gets too thin, which we can talk about in a second. Now, that said, we have both those wheeled pickup trucks and amphibious vehicles, and it will be necessary to use the amphibious vehicles to do the geographic North Pole. That's why we leave in January. We will hit the north as the sun comes up and be working there in February and March.
So you don't have to take one vehicle all the way around. You could switch off vehicles.
Well, we actually are planning to take one vehicle. That white pickup in that shot will do the entire trip except for the water sections to the geographic North Pole. For that, we will use and we should get to Vasily Login and the other vehicles. Why don't we, from here, why don't we can we show the video?
Sure.
Short video? Sure. Phoebe, can you show the main expedition video? So these are the Yamelia amphibious vehicles. There's some polar bears. We don't like to travel at night, but occasionally have to. It's much more difficult. This is going over the Strasogis, or the broken sections of the Arctic Ocean ice, which are pulled up by the tides. Trailers on these vehicles to carry our extra fuel. There's the 3 Arctic trucks, pickup trucks that's on the tundra before you get to the ocean. It's Vasily Login and me. So here we're picking our way through the glacial erratic rocks on the tundra.
No road signs.
Yeah, no road signs. And now you see how the tires work. Minus 36.
Whew. With the wind chill or without the wind?
Without the wind chill.
Easy to get lost out there.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll look at some maps in a second. This is a 7-year-old man named Vasily Login who designed and had these 4 amphibious vehicles built. They've already been to the geographic North Pole. We have on this team every one of the world's experts at driving on the poles. 51-inch flotation tires. That's him, 70 years old, standing looking over the ice.
Wow.
Caribou.
How do you guys sleep and eat out there? Maybe we could talk about that at some point.
Well, I have pictures, not of the sleeping. So those vehicles, I mean, they look huge. They're paper-thin aluminum bodies. They weigh less than a Toyota Corolla because they're full flotation. The pickup trucks, on the other hand, weigh about 8,000 pounds, which works. Had some tough weather. And these things are a little like Westphalia campers. Like you can sleep 4 men in it and have tables inside. They're quite versatile. These are the huge ice blocks that you have to navigate through, and I'll show you some radar imagery that we had to use to pick our way through them.
I see you have a drone. Are you using the drone to navigate it all, or just for?
We do use that. This is actually repairing a ball joint with battery stick welders. Unbelievable handicraft. It's hard to tell, but those blocks are as big as buildings, which is the problem with using drones for looking at the ice, because it doesn't give you quite a perfect perspective. The vastness of it, the incredible calmness and beauty is unbelievable.
Polar bears must have been like, what the heck?
Well, they don't care. I mean, they're not afraid of us. And actually, that's the mother. They squirm in the snow like that to get other scents off of their hair so that they're more sensitive. That guy, that's Vasily Login, 70 years old, an adventurer's adventurer. This guy was on the Soviet Olympic mountaineering team, has summited not just the 7 summits, but all of the 14 hardest summits from the hard sides, like that guy. Still can do one-arm pull-up. Decided he wanted to go to the North Pole. So designed those amphibious vehicles to do it, and did it over the course of 2 years. That's Vasily Login, an Icelandic guy named Ao and me. The great thing about, I mean, it was very nice. Emil Grimson, the Icelandic guy, accepted me from the start as being one of them, and I went to Iceland and we tested things. Vasily Shagnovsky, on Emil Grimson's recommendation, accepted me into the team, basically.
But you're kind of the weak link at that point,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, you might be great in dirt in London, you know, in New York, but you're nothing on the ice, I would think, in the beginning.
Well, I do have a specialty in ice driving. I've won every major snow rally in North America, so I kind of already had an ice thing going on. Okay. But
what's the biggest challenge with driving on the ice? I have no idea.
Yeah, so if you're not driving fast, it's reading the surface and knowing how quickly to go and when to go quickly and how to use the vehicle. So all of these vehicles, they're very specialist things, especially those Yamelia Russian vehicles. And you have, in that case, 5 locking differentials, and you have to know how to use them. You're not moving quickly, and it's got a very oddball system of it's actually an upside-down gearbox. First is on the wrong end, and you have to caress the thing through. And you need to be able to read the snow, and you'll see sometimes we get out. If we went through some of these slides, I could show you. You have to be able to read the ice because there is all kinds of ice. And some of it can bite you. Oh, yeah, let's go back. This is actually good talk. So this is actually the route that Vasily Login, the mountaineer, with his vehicles, went from 2013 through 2015 to go from Russia, across the North Pole, down through Canada, and back along Alaska, back to Russia. Amazing route.
How long did that take?
3 years. They did it in sections. Yeah. It probably is the most astounding driving thing that's done. This is my pencil map before we went of where we're going to go. But it has some fun things on it, like a big circle that says, "Here be bears," basically, because that circle is the most populated polar bear area in the world. The little X there is where the Franklin ships were abandoned. And we...
This was the late 1800s? Right?
Yeah, 1846 they set out.
They were looking for the Northwest Passage, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. And actually the Boothia Strait there is labeled as actually the southernmost Northwest Passage, but up there at Beechy Island is where 3 of them were buried, and we're right in that zone. We're in that hit zone of the Northwest Passage where all the exploring was happening.
A lot of dead souls too, like what, 120, 130?
King William Island there is said to be a haunted island because the 129 men disappeared, like without a trace. Yeah. And I can show you some stuff if we go through the slides yeah, so here we had to use, and this is, I credit Emil Grimson with so much work here, but this is actually an interesting database, the CQ.org database, which is managed by the Inuit in the north, that keeps track of all the different reports from the local hunters of the conditions of the ice. Mm-hmm. This is actually, obviously, satellite imagery. We have to use that to look for roughness of the ice and also thickness of the ice. This shows various areas of roughness. You got to stay away from the red areas. That's where it's all been pulled up by the tides. The orange and yellow areas we had to work our way through. An interesting little column there, if you remember, like Smilla's sense of snow. There's a whole chart of different Inuit names for different types of ice. And they have an incredible, developed instinctual feeling for the types of ice. And it's been a real honor for us to work with them. We pulled behind us, I don't know if you can find, Phoebe, there's a picture of a ground penetrating sonar. It looks like a white bar with a thing in the middle, but there it is. We dragged that behind one of the vehicles, and we actually measured the thickness of the ice throughout the trip to feed that data. And we had a German scientist, Christian Haas, who was helping us manage that to log that data and give it back to the CQ.org database. It was a fascinating pursuit. This is the array of vehicles just as we were coming down, having made so we should back up. Last March, we had to go and figure out if the last piece of the round the world expedition was possible. Our people from our team have already done the length of Greenland. Vasilia Logan's team has already done the circumnavigation of the pole and across the North Pole. The Icelandic guys from Arctic Trucks have already crisscrossed Antarctica almost every direction you can. Nobody had ever driven from the continental shelf of North America to the high Arctic. So last March, we went to see if it was possible. That's the video you just saw. That we went and just had to test it, see if it was even possible. And on the one hand, we had some real challenges. On the other hand, it pretty much went how we thought it would go, which is pretty amazing. So we haven't applied for a record or a first or anything, but we know that it hasn't been done. And we ended up ended up working with the local indigenous populations, the Inuit, in a really great way, which, let's show a couple of pictures there. Because there is such a great sensitivity. Yeah, so this is in the sort of almost the last community. There's another community further north, very far north, called Resolute, which is partially military and government, and there is an indigenous population there too. But
this is northern Canada?
Northern Canada, okay. Yeah, way up. This is a community called Cambridge Bay, where there is a fairly healthy Inuit population. And when we got there with our vehicles, we got along with everybody. Sitting in the passenger seat, yeah, that's Cambridge Bay.
They were expecting you, or you just showed up?
They were a little bit expecting us, but they weren't expecting it to be quite the impact. I did call the RCMP police ahead and say, just so you know, when over the ocean come 4 amphibious vehicles you've never seen before with Russian license plates on them, it's okay. Yeah, it's going to be okay. And so when we rolled in at night, and it was only barely okay because we were dragging one of our vehicles with us, and it was pretty tough. But I had reached out and hired an local Inuit guide who ended up being wonderful, and he was down waiting for us in a blizzard on his snowmobile wearing full furs, looked like a polar bear, and was waiting for us, searching around for us, and then brought us in. It was amazing.
Hey, well, what are some of the Inuit names for the ice, and what does it mean?
Well, let's go back to that screen. I'd have to look up the catalog now. Aglu, Anisak, Aquajak. I'm not.
Your Inuit's a little rusty?
Yeah, it is. Well, it shouldn't be. If you can fast forward a little bit, actually, through those things again, it was an incredible honor for me to meet the people. The lady sitting in the passenger seat of the white truck, one back, is an elder there. And she introduced me, go forward to that one you were just showing. That lady there, Bessie, is one of the real elders of the community in Kitikmeot. With facial tattoos, real deal. And she had apparently, some days before we came, had a dream about the people would come. And we
Great white men in Russian vehicles
kind of
dream?
And we had a lovely dialogue, and I got to know them a little bit. And then they called me in to their elders' meeting room, essentially, at the Heritage Center. And had a talk with me, and we had tea, and they said, we've decided to name you Omilgoktok. So I actually have an indigenous name in the community.
And what does that mean?
It means men with thin lips.
I mean, they're not that thin, but okay.
No, but actually it is an amazing honor because that is actually the family name of this family. And her husband had been known as Omilgoktok in the community and had died 7 years previously, and they'd been waiting to assign the name. Now they do assign the name more than once, but it was a surprise. That technically then is my sister there. She was a little surprised, I think, by the assigning of the name, but she's been lovely about it ever since, and she runs the Indigenous Heritage Center there. And Bessie is, I mean, they have an incredible sense of humor. Then they're like, okay, now you're married. They're like, oh boy, that's
Happy's like, I don't think so, sister.
But they're wickedly funny and lovely folks, and it's been wonderful for me. I've had the chance to go back, which we can talk about in a second. It's a great honor for me as a Canadian and as somebody adventuring up there to be sort of adopted enough into the community for them to give me a name.
Yeah, that's some street cred you got up there.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about the truck that fell through the ice, because I love the whole LiDAR you were using. By the way, were the Inuits laughing about your LiDAR? They're like, bah, ha, ha. Or were they like, wow, this is great technology? I mean.
No, they don't. I mean, there's plenty of laughter in the Indigenous community, but I don't think directly at us. There was plenty of doubt about us before we rolled in or as we rolled in, but as we started talking with them, and like, people sound each other out pretty fast. And by the time you talk to the Icelandic guys for a while about driving on snow, and you talk to the Russians who've already been to the North Pole, and everybody sits down in the same room together, like the elder male in that community, a guy named George, we sat down with him just in the back of a shop, and we're talking, I'm looking over maps, and after, at first he was like, oh, I don't know, why are you planning to do that? It's kind of a tough route, and talked about it for, well, okay, then I'd avoid this, I'd avoid that, and within an hour, he's like, I wish I were going with you. I wonder can I go with you, or can we figure, like, so it's really, everyone's very curious, and there's a sense of adventure. I mean, these people live on the land, too, like, the thickness of the ice, the character of the ice, where the polar bears are right now, where the seals are, this matters. Bessie, where are the flowers growing? Where can they get resources? I mean, the land is everything. And so for us to be up there and asking them questions about the land, they're like, well, okay, we're happy to tell you. But interestingly, they don't travel that far. Like, there is plenty of travel amongst the communities, but people from their communities don't travel that far to other communities that much. So for them, we took one Inuit guide on our first trip, and then when we went back in August, we took 4 Inuit throughout our trip. And they were like, oh, I get to go somewhere I've never gone before. I mean, for us, it's like, okay, it's a 1,000-kilometer drive, but it's like, it's in the same area. Yeah. But for them, it's like a whole other place.
Yeah, it sounds like an incredible journey. So you lost a vehicle up there.
So let's go through these slides real quick. I think we can get to that. Go forward, Phoebe. Right, so this is a good example. So this is, it's hard to see, but there's a seam of ice going across the middle of the frame there, which is like where the tides pulled up and cracked the ice. And what happens is, in some places, the salt water comes up through that crack and then softens the ice all around. So what's happened here, even though we're going carefully, this vehicle has pushed in and fallen into this sea slurry, the slurry ice, we call it, right? And so then you have to slow down and you have to pull it out. You see the cable, there's a rope on that one, because there's almost no way out of it. It's like quicksand. But that's okay, because there's usually enough to support the vehicle.
Does everybody sort of, like, what's the protocol? It goes through the ice, everybody dives out, or it's very calm, it happens slowly?
In this case, it's no more severe than just getting stuck in the mud. You're like, whoops, there's some slurry here. Let's okay, everybody stop, and let's look around. You get on the radios, and let's check everything out. Because it is hard to see through the snow, especially if there's been snow afterwards. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so let's just stop this for a second then, Phoebe. So if you can go back one. So we successfully made the trip with the pickup trucks and the amphibious vehicles all the way to Resolute, which is as far north as Sir John Franklin ever went. And that's where the last community is before the military establishment at Alert. And then the plan was for the amphibious vehicles to stay up there and test the amphibious capabilities in the further north area where the ice is broken. And the pickup trucks would not make it to the open water, so we were just turning them around to send them back. And the Icelandic guys were great. We have the exact route on the GPS that we just followed. We have the ice data the whole way, and it's nice and smooth. We figured everything out. We're just going to go back. Right? Hard. I mean, still hard enough. Still 2,200 kilometers southward in the deep, deadly winter. Right? But they went back pretty fast in a line, and the second vehicle of them fell through the ice. In the most populated polar bear area of the world at about 9 in the evening. And it was the second vehicle in line. The driver, Torfi, who's in one of the photos there, very good Icelandic technician, truck builder, driver, had the presence of mind to get on the radio and say, we're going in, we're going in. So the vehicle 50 yards in front stopped. In breaking through the ice, it ripped the left rear wheel off, in very much the way it looks like it there, but the wheel ripped off. So it got caught down in the ice, they couldn't open the driver's door. So he then yelled at our Inuit guide who was with him, the guy who was previously in the polar bear outfit, now is in normal clothes, but they were both in stocking feet, to get out the door. They scampered out the passenger door.
And what's the temperature? Is it still 36 below?
Yeah, it's about that night was about minus 25.
Oh, well, warm night.
Yeah, and with a good wind. But then Torfi also had the presence of mind, once they got got out, and they're standing in their stocking feet, wet to their knees because the ice, moves as you step out onto it.
Brutal.
But he had the presence of mind to know that, all the safety and camping gear is on the back of that truck. So he jumped back on the truck and started,
As it's sinking.
As it's sinking, and started unstrapping things and throwing it off. And then as it went down, jumped back off it on the ice. Now, unfortunately, the safety rifles, or the things that we were to scare polar bears off with, were in the back of that truck and went down with it. But they got some safety gear off, and the other truck was there too. Now, the other truck was heavier, towing fuel.
So he's thinking he's going in next.
Well, but stopped about 50 yards short. They went and got in that truck, but then they're like, okay, now what do we do? We know
Now it's even heavier, though.
Right. Well, now that we know there's thin ice around us, we don't want to close the doors in case we can't jump out really fast. We don't leave the doors open because there's polar bears all around here. So they had a relatively tense night, sitting that night out. Fortunately, nobody seems to have developed PTSD, but
And they didn't move; they just stayed.
they stayed there. In first light, they got out and started. We have these amazing ice picks. Started looking around, and they realized that straight ahead was now open water. And had he not been on the radio, they just would have driven right into it.
Wow.
Off to on another side was extremely thin water, and where they'd just gone, our ice data showed that 5 days previous it had been 60 centimeters thick, right, which is plenty for us. We need about 30 centimeters. Now it was down to 15 centimeters in 5 days. And it turns out that the southernmost Northwest Passage goes through a passage called the Boothia Peninsula. The Ballot Strait that goes through the Boothia Peninsula, and it's very fast water that never freezes. But then that water turns south and comes straight down through an area called the Tasmanian Islands, which were named by Sir John Franklin, who had previously been the governor of Tasmania, and it was the last place that his ships passed before they were beset by ice. And he hated Tasmania because he had a terrible time as a governor there. So
He was not popular, I take it.
no, right. And so it turns out that the ice is very thin in this area, and George, our elder from Cambridge Bay, wasn't aware of that because this was hundreds of kilometers from where his area was from. Turns out that the Taloyak native community knew that this ice was questionable. It was a difficult hunting area. And now we know, and now we triangulated the data with that, our ice data with it, and when that change happens, because with climatic change, which is a reality, they're seeing it happen earlier every year, and we can tell them the date that it changes now, or it changed last year. So the vehicle fell through. Let's show the video. Let's show that short video now. If you can get back to that one. Yeah, there we go. So this is, I came back down, so let's stop for another second, sorry. So they got that vehicle to the island, and we had a ski plane on standby, which unfortunately then couldn't land there. So the DEW line we had a friend who had the chopper for that. So we got a chopper to come up, pick the guys up. They unloaded the vehicle, they made it to morning, realized that they'd been circled by 2 polar bears all night, tracks all around them. Our indigenous guide got up to the island, saw the polar bears. They got the vehicle up to the island, about 100 yards away, left the vehicle on the island, got choppered out. We took the amphibious vehicles, we turned around, went straight down, took us 3 days to get to them. And then this is the video of us finding where the vehicle went through. We may have to reboot it. Oh, there we go. Just because I want you to see this moment where the camera goes through the water. It may not work. Let's just get to the image of there. So you put the camera through the ice, and there's the truck.
Oh. How deep is that?
It's about 25 feet deep, and it's about 100 yards from shore. And it was just we made that hole in the ice, and I put a GoPro through, and there was the truck, right?
And how fast does that hole freeze up again?
I mean, the vehicle went through that ice. You see it was about that thick right there? It had gone through that 3 days previously. So it formed that thick again. So that meant we had to go back and get it out. Right? Just
because of the environmental impact.
Yeah, just do the right thing, right? So it meant that in August, we got together another ragtag team of heroes.
Vasily and the gang, or a different?
Vasily and the gang, that's our band. Vasily and the gang. Yeah, we've got 2 Vasilis there right in the middle. Starting from the left of the screen, that's 4 helicopter pilots or maybe 5, from Coldstream Helicopters, an indigenous guide, me, Vasily Sheknovsky, Vasily Ilagin, 2 Icelandic ice divers who were unbelievably hard guys. Wow. To the 2 guys, I got an underwater ROV crew from Inuit, indigenous guys who were wonderful and incredibly helpful in the end. We found 10 circles together on the island.
What's an ROD crew?
ROV, underwater camera.
Got it, okay,
Yeah.
got it.
And then Emil Grimson is there, and an old camera friend of mine. So we got this crew together, and we can go to the next slide. Here's a Airbus Super Puma helicopter, one of the heaviest lift helicopters there is.
They use them for like logging and things like that, right?
Well, that's a Sikorsky, but this is a firefighting helicopter generally. But we had to stage it up from southern British Columbia. So I mean, imagine that. We had to like go from airport to airport, moving it to the high Arctic.
I'm sure that's cheap.
Yep. And we put 2 inflatable boats in it, and engines, and a lot of other gear besides fuel. And we flew up to an island called, the Tasmanian Islands, where there's no permanent inhabitants within 400 kilometers in any direction, 300 miles. And it was an incredibly peaceful island. And we ended up camping there for the better part of 4 or 5 days to go and extract the vehicle. We took airbags with us, compressors, and let's show this. If this video is going to render, let's try the next video. This is our video of extracting the truck. It'll tell most of the story. This is in August, so we still have this much ice in August. And there it is. It moved about 20 feet and a little bit deeper and rolled over 1/4 before we got there.
From the current.
Yeah.
Which is quite strong there, right?
Right. This is a DC-3, where we took up from Yellowknife.
In March earlier this year, we had an overland expedition to be the first people to drive wheeled vehicles from the continental shelf of North America to the high Arctic. And in one sense, we succeeded completely. We drove 2,300 kilometers overland and over the Arctic Ocean to go from Yellowknife to Resolute. Never been done before. So we were very proud of that. However, on the return trip, some of the vehicles that had separated out from some other of the vehicles, one of them went through the ice. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but now, 6 months later, we have to go back and do the right thing, get that vehicle out so that it doesn't contaminate the environment, and so that we leave the place just as we come.
This is the community of Joe Haven, where Almundsen, who finally did cross the Northwest Passage, left his boat, the Joy. It's a sand harbor. That's the Chinook, the Super Puma.
Massive operation with incredible logistics, lots of moving parts, so many loads to calculate, so many airplanes to load, so many helicopters to manage. It's a massive scale.
These chopper pilots were young and brave.
Brave in the dangerous of pulling up the car. Yeah.
Really old campus was. It's pretty incredible what our people used to do to travel, and for me, this is way out in the middle of nowhere, and to see how they came here and survived, probably thrived actually. It's pretty incredible.
So even for the indigenous people who were with us, it was the island was eye-opening. So then we had to take the boats, and lots of compressors, lots of air. These guys, they're wearing cable knit sweaters, but they're special forces divers. And this is literally the moment. It's a 5-mile-an-hour current, which if you're a diver, as some of you guys are, it's a heavy current to dive in. You can see it. We had to wait till the tide was shifting every day. We had 2 windows in the day for about an hour.
Wow.
To dive.
It's just an heavy current here. I don't think I've ever lower than this much current.
Attached airbags, floated it,
Amazing.
towed it to shore. That's just fighting the current there.
Basically wasted. They got put on speed record and the air bubbles.
set it back on the bottom near the shore, put another airbag on it, rolled it over. That's us looking at the ROV camera. All the time we were trying to capture any fluids, but fortunately it lost almost no fluid. We reckon less than 3 liters.
Definitely better feeling seeing it come out of the water than going into it.
He was in the vehicle when it went in. That's our Indigenous guide who was with the vehicle. And there it comes. It's Vasily happy. And then we had to get it off the island.
It's actually a big relief, especially it's put a lot of effort into planning this operation and all the preparation for it. So seeing it, everything working out as planned, that's actually a big relief.
So this is the heaviest load that this model of helicopter's ever lifted, it turned out. And we had to make several attempts at it and unload everything from the helicopter and several things from the vehicle. And we were able to carry it down to Cambridge Bay, where 3 months later, a ship came and picked it up, and it's now into Toronto, actually. So we remediated the area. We estimated lost 2.5 liters of fluid in total.
Wow.
And it was a massive, massive effort.
Impressive recovery.
Thanks, yeah. We think it's the highest, the furthest north vehicle or heavy machinery recovery ever done. That is just fighting the current to hold the diver in place. And then I think we have one more slide, or is that the last one? Oh, yeah, this is a neat little story. That guy is a guy named Ryan Harris, who is the guy who found the Erebus and also the Terror with a team. And it turns out at that first university you asked me, at University of Toronto, we were classmates, and so with my wife too. And so I got back, this is a great Explorer moment, this is why I have it here for us. After we did all this, we got back to Cambridge, or this is to Joe Haven, which is it's a very small Indigenous community with a sand harbor, which is legendary as being the place where Roald Amundsen landed, and the boat was until not too long ago when it got repatriated to Norway. But I saw a couple of guys with Parks Canada jackets on, and I said, hey, do you know Ryan Harris? And they're like, yeah, he's our boss. And I'm like, well, is he in town? I'm like, yeah, he just got into town. We're going back out to the Erebus. It's caving in some places. We got to take care of it. I'm like, great. So I go up and knock on his door, and it was very Dr. Livingston, I presume. He's like, ACP. I'm like, Ryan, yeah. What are you doing here? Well, I'm on an expedition. So am I. and so we said, we're getting out of here, and we got some aluminum tanks. We got some airbags. Well, what size airbags do you have? And so we gave him a bunch of our gear, and now it's working on the Erebus expedition.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a really great one. We sat down for an hour over coffee and talked about the challenges of diving and raising stuff up there, and it was just a great moment.
So I have to ask you something I'm fascinated about, the Darien Gap. Can you explain, this is sort of one of the challenges in your sort of polar tour.
Yeah, so the Darien Gap is about a 60-mile stretch between Panama and Colombia of part jungle and part swamp.
Impassable, famously impassable, so they say.
Yes and no. So, it's been passed by indigenous populations for hundreds of thousands of years, right? Thousands of years, but it's not somewhere that you go through easily, and it's not somewhere that wheeled vehicles go through easily. The hubris of confident adventurers, let's say, like 4 Chevy Corvairs in 1963 left from Chicago and thought they were going to drive through to forge the Trans-America Highway, and one of them is still abandoned in the middle of the. If people ever make it there, it's this incredible photo opportunity of this Chevy Corvair with completely grown over. There have been a number of people who have tried to traverse it with motorcycles, with vehicles, and so on. A few motorcycles have made it. There have only ever been 4 expeditions claim to have done it with four-wheeled vehicles. One, very famously, John Blatchford Snell, a British major in 1970 with brand new Range Rovers, 150 British military officers.
You can carry the truck.
Yeah, they sorted.
I'm not sure if that counts.
Yeah,
really is.
I don't want to denigrate it, but the point is they floated downriver on rafts for quite a long ways. Similarly, Mark Smith, the guy who started Jeep Jamboree, legendary American Jeeper from up by the Rubicon Trail, went south to north, which is a terrible idea for lots of reasons, but went south to north with 5 Jeeps, kind of did it mostly, but went 12 miles on a raft. one guy and his then girlfriend, now wife, although he's recently passed away, did it 100% on wheels, only going across the rivers with log bridges and barges in 1985/86.
In what kind of vehicle?
In a Jeep CJ5, single one. He later went back and did it with a two-wheel drive motorcycle called a Rokon with water-filled tires, and got arrested by FARC rebels and got jailed and all kind, but got back to the motorcycle. Huge story. So when my original pole-to-pole expedition, I wanted to go through the Darien Gap. Because then, 10 years ago, it was kind of possible. Still incredibly hard, but the FARC rebels had not put down their arms yet. Now, 6 years ago they did, 7 years ago, roughly. And what has happened is it's become very lawless. It is now, there was drug running before, but there's human trafficking. It's a big, people walk through it all the time. Hopeful immigrants walk through it on the daily. But it's a jungle on the one hand. There's three kinds of deadly spiders, several kinds of deadly snakes, terrible fire ants. I mean, it's a terrible place to traverse, really bad. But I wanted to do it because if you're going to go overland from one pole to the other, you got to make that 60 miles. The problem now is that it's just practically impossible. Modern vehicles, the size of them and the weight of them is practically impossible. But just politically now, we're gonna barge around it on the Transglobal, and it's a thorn in my side, but we couldn't responsibly do it.
Quickly, it's such a neat story about how you got in touch with the guy who did do it, which I found so wacky.
Yeah, well, so a guy named Lauren Upton had done this trip, and kids, you're gonna have to cover your ears for this one. So I got his phone number in Idaho. This is about 10 years ago, and I cold called him, and I called up, and the lady answered and said, "Hello." And I'm like, hello, is this Patty? Maybe? I'm like, okay, sorry, you don't know me. My name is Andrew. I want to drive through the Darien jungle, the Darien Gap. And so, well, we drove through the Darien Gap. Like, yeah, I know, that's what I'm calling. And so, well, geez, you better talk to Lauren then. Like, well, that's kind of what I was hoping. That's perfect. So, Lauren! And the guy comes, what? Who's this? I'm like, sorry, sir, you don't know me. No, I don't. But I want to drive through the Darien Gap. Well, shit, I drove through the Darien Gap. I'm like, yeah, I know, that's why I'm calling you. Well, let me put in my hearing aid and turn off the TV. Hold on a second. And so, really, kids, you're gonna have to cover your ears. So one's asleep, good. So, oh, she's not. So, this is gonna be a terrible influence. So I start talking to him, and he checks out my bona fides, and I tell him I've done the Baja 1000 and other stuff, and the Rubicon and all that. And he's like, well, okay, right then. So how are you going to do it? Which way are you going to go? And I'm like, well, I'm thinking of going south to north. Good. You got to go south to north. I was a stupid-ass guy. I went from north to south. It was so stupid, because then I got halfway down, and shit, the goddamn rains came, right? And then I had to sit there for 300 days and watch goddamn bananas grow. Because you only have like a 45-day window that you can go through before the rains come back, right? And so we talk about it for a while, and eventually like, oh shit, Andrew, you're gonna do this. You're gonna do it in 45 days. You're gonna go north or south to north. You're gonna kill this thing. You come out and check out my notes and everything. So then I did. I went. They would camp. So they'd leave Idaho, and in the winter they would camp near Blythe, like down in the desert in California. Take down a camper and like just camp in the middle of the desert for the winter. So I drove out there and met them. He's like, oh shit, here you are. And he was the big guy and like tough as nails. But he shared all his notes with me and everything, and like he did things. It's such an interesting guy, so innovative. He welded like like tackle blocks to the ends of the bumpers, so that he would just string cables between trees, and then on cross slopes, just drive on these cross slopes and get around things. And he had a local fixer, Carlos, who we eventually became friendly with in Colombia, who helped with a lot of things. They basically walked ahead of it, finding through the swamp part in the south, finding solid enough ground for this very lightweight CJ5 to be able to dance through the swamp. Just a lovely guy. Nobody's ever written up the story. They asked if I would. I didn't have the time. Somebody still should. Patty still is trying. Patty has that Jeep out on tour right now. It's just one of those great adventure things of just somebody who wanted to do something, and they did it together, and it was real hard, and they had all the bites to prove it and all the stuff.
And no sponsorship, no big logo shows or anything like that?
Well, that vehicle eventually did go around the world, the Sand Sea Discovery. They drove it then, I mean, they took a route around the continents. They went down to South America, then up through Africa, and actually they had an uncompleted section between Jordan and Libya. Politically, they couldn't finish it in the 80s, and they went back 12 or 15 years ago, 12 years ago, and finished the last mile. So they actually did complete their lap. And then he passed away last year.
Happy with a smile on his face.
Yeah, I'm sure gritting his teeth and smiling the whole way. He was a character.
So now, when will the expedition formally begin? I know you said in 2024, but is there a date?
Yeah, January. Well, about the second week of January 2024, we'll leave from New York City, which should put us to Yellowknife at the right time to retrace our steps that we've now innovated from this past March. We're actually going back this coming March. Next month to take the 4 amphibious vehicles further north again, because we never really got the chance to do the amphibious testing we wanted to there. We know they work. They've already been across the North Geographic Pole. People cheat that a little bit and like go to the magnetic north, or like we went to the North Pole, but it's like, you know, the 1858 magnetic North Pole is way far south because it migrates north. But the geographic North Pole is the dot at the top where Santa Claus is, and it's real hard to get there. And you know, some people get there with planes and stuff and so on, but to go overland to it, especially the vehicle, real hard. So we have to make sure we have everything in place.
So you're going to start in January of 2024, and then how long will the entire trip, do you estimate, take?
The whole thing is planned to be about 16 months, including we haven't talked much about Antarctica, but normally when people go to the South Pole, you know, you fly to the Union Glacier in a freight plane or a cargo plane, get unloaded, and then, you know, drive to the South Pole, or ski to the South Pole, or walk to the South Pole, or something. In order to do this correctly and be around the world expedition, you have to go coast to coast on the South Pole, right? So we did that, and I wasn't on it at that point. I expect to be on it the next time. But in December last year, the Icelandic team with some of the Russian team went coast to coast, or worked on the route to get to Marguerite Bay. Unfortunately, the last 10 kilometers or so, they got very heavy weather, and we never finished that last little piece. So right now, we're working on the Antarctic route, because we have to go coast to coast. And for that, we got to take an icebreaker and get the cars to the shore, get overland, and get them off the other side, right? You can't just take them to the middle and fly them out of a glacier.
Complicated.
Real complicated.
And will you have, like, is Happy going to come along for a little while, your wife?
It's funny.
16 months is a long time for a guy to be on the road, if you know what I mean. I don't mean to be indelicate.
Are you going to go calling?
I'm just saying, a bunch of dudes in the Arctic.
Watching this right now. The
reindeer are getting scared.
We'll all stay warm somehow. There will be a couple of guys who will do the entire thing. I don't expect to be one of those guys. I expect to go in for some of the hard parts. But I am helping with the media story throughout, with telling the story, because, I mean, it's like, to think of Lauren and Patty Upton. I mean, they made it a massive achievement, and nobody knows about it because, you know, it never happened because nobody was there to watch, right? And it's not that we want to make a big deal of that, but part of the Transglobal Car Expedition's purpose is it's sponsored by technically a Swiss nonprofit called Goodyear, whose purpose is to take technologies to various places in the world that need innovative technologies. So the ground penetrating sonar that we took to the north, we will take again to help augment the ice data. We plan to have similar projects through Africa, throughout the world. So we want to tell the stories about that assistance that we're bringing, and so for that, I plan to assist with all of it, but I don't plan to be on the road for 16 months, I promise. But I do hope to do the length of Greenland and the crossing of Antarctica.
I don't know how you are time-wise, but I think we'd love to ask maybe a couple of questions, if we have any audience questions.
Sorry to go long. I probably pushed your envelope.
No, that was great. It was. I could talk to you all night. Believe me, I'm interested. Any questions from our audience?
David McAllister. So in your rally experience, I always want to do the Paris to Dakar rally, which I think got canceled for being irresponsible or driving over locals. And when you talked about you couldn't do the Darien Gap for responsibility, maybe Did you ever do any Paris to Dakar stuff? And any crazy stories from that?
No, I drove for Mitsubishi for 9 years in the rally series, and they teased me and said, you know what, our last year's Dakar vehicles are actually just sitting there. You want to take them to Dakar? I'm like, yeah, because that's one of the hardest races in the world. But I never have had the chance. I have a number of my friends now that, so what happened with the Dakar is that it basically, it became politically and security insecure to race in that area. Also, I think they were just finding it hard. So the race was moved 12 or 15 years ago now to South America, and Americans got a lot more involved because it was a lot closer to home. And so Red Bull got involved, BF Goodrich, who's my long-term partner, got involved. And so I've had a number of my friends who competed there, and now it's moved back to the Middle East. So the Dakar has been nowhere near Dakar for the better part of 20 years. But it still is a very, very hard race. And old rally drivers, like Sebastian Loeb is now one of the most competitive racers, Carlos Sainz, Colin McRae, who I got to know through X Games days, have all done it, and most of them have won it. But it's, I said, I've competed in the Baja 1000 several times. I love rally racing because it's 10/10ths all the time. Like, I would go through rally stages, and you saw some pictures of my rally cars there, and like both mirrors would be flipped in by hitting trees. Like, that's that margin of error, and I love that. And in order to win in the national championship, and we did, you have to be wide open. The Baja 1000, it's been well described by Jimmy Vassar as a 24-hour plane crash. You're constantly destroying the vehicle and destroying yourself. I've been, not to be indelicate again, but happy to see, I peed blood at the end. It's rough, right? So.
And that's not even from crashing, that's just the physical
constant
pounding.
Yeah, and I worry about micro concussions for all of us. But that's incredibly difficult. I enjoy it greatly, but you're not, unless you're driving $1 million trophy truck, which only a few guys are at the front of the field, you're driving to save the machine, right? So that's why old rally drivers, like the Carlos Sainzes and the Sebastian Loebs, end up on the Dakar, because you have to go quite fast, but you have to have that little margin for things going wrong or not torturing the machine. You're actually nursing the machine through all the time. And in a way, that's what we're doing, sure, in the Arctic. We're not on any pace. We know we have to get to certain places to beat the weather, to beat the ice melting, and so on. But this is more a delicate affair. The Dakar is somewhere in between. Look, if you, I want to do it. If you know any sponsors, I'm in. But it's a whole different beast, and I love the idea of it, but I haven't done it. Any other questions?
A quick question. You talk about sponsors. How do you finance all this? This is not free of charge to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the racing was classic sponsors. I remember my first X Games, I had like 20 sponsors or something. There's a sponsor for the engine rods, and there's a different sponsor for the valves and all that. And then I needed to get 20 sets of tickets to the X Games. By the end, I had like by the end I had Ford and Michelin, or Ford and BF Goodrich. For the expedition stuff, yes, you need sponsors. Fortunately, a couple of the people involved basically are privately financing it. So that's the advantage. When I was trying to get like Ford and Netflix to sponsor it, Netflix actually said, we'll greenlight it tomorrow if you take your family. So that would have meant like us going through the Darien Gap, and it's like maybe in a few years, girls, but not yet. So, I had to do it with external sponsors, but the reason that it's happening now is that these are adventurers who can finance it.
Now, what do you do if your girls say they want to become, dangerous rally car racers or Formula One, what's her name, Danica,
Yeah. What am I going to say?
I don't know.
Now that said, I mean, I want to wrap them in bubble wrap all the time.
Exactly my point.
When we bought a family car, I wanted one with like 400 airbags, right?
A Volvo.
Because people are idiots, and like people are on their phones all the time. But
what if they wanted to be motorcycle racers?
See, look at Phoebe, you're amazing. So there's Rosie in a go-kart that's supposed to have a roll cage on it, but somehow it doesn't. And then flip back to the other. There's Lila lying in the back of the pickup. Yeah, this one, I call this our little addition to disaster.
It looks like an antique.
That's our Ford Model T that we use to drive around LA. Yeah, we strapped.
That's the only thing you're allowed to drive in LA at this point.
That's right. We strapped 2 car seats in the back of that. The good thing about the Model T is at 35 miles an hour, you feel like you're going 200 because and everything's an emergency exit, and it's like constantly falling apart. But that's Lila on a little go-kart that we made out of plywood and leftover parts from a plastic car, and I ordered an electric motor online, basically. That thing goes 42 miles per hour.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and it's basically built on hopes and dreams and sticky tape. So the point is that they already are taking risks that their mother probably shouldn't know.
Clearly, we have time for one more question.
Yeah.
All the stories are amazing, and the one you have, so the expedition you have coming up, that's going to be documented. Like you're going to be filming and turning it into a documentary film.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know yet whether it's a single film or a short series, and we haven't, honestly, like what we've produced so far, we just sort of privately produced. We took cameras, we shot it, and we haven't baked it up in anything because we just haven't had time. You're like some of the only viewers of it.
Yeah.
But for the big expedition, yes, we have a media plan.
That's what I was going to ask you. Like the stuff you've already done has not gone out in some sort of series, because I think you've got a great series of like, hey, we did this. Then we went back and got the car, and now we're going to go do this thing.
Yeah. So we have that stuff in the can, and we haven't put together, and I'm open to lots of suggestions, we haven't put together the red thread for the whole story yet. Because it's about, it's always about the people, and I wanted to tell the story about the people, Emil and Vasily, the two Vasilis and so on, and all the great people. It's always about the people. It always ends up being about the people. That's what matters, right? The adventuring is great, the terrain is amazing, the vehicles are cool, but it's always about the vehicle. And maybe I can end on this. Vasily Login, the mountaineer, the ex-Soviet Olympic mountaineer, right? I knew that I would be like initiated sooner or later. He'd have to test me, right? And can we go to the food stuff? Show me kissing the fish. A lot of what we ate was frozen fish. We went, Vasily Login came to me and said, Andrew, we will need some fish. Where will I get fish? And I'm like, and we're in Yellowknife. I'm like, well, let's go talk to the local fishermen at Great Slave Lake. And so we got 100 kilograms of just freshly caught whitefish. And they just threw them in the back of these barrels behind the trucks, and they all froze. And we basically ate hacksawed and shaved fish throughout. Phoebe, are you there? Can you find the picture of the fish? But I knew there'd be a moment where he said, Andrew, come over. We are going to eat some dinner. And like, it's like, looking at me as I'm eating the raw fish. I'm like, oh, this is great. It's sushi. It's fine. And maybe, yeah, there we go. So that's just a sectioned fish. That was a regular meal item.
Sushi without the roll and the white sugary rice and the wasabi.
Right, exactly.
It's like the S of sushi.
I've got some great short films too, where like the guys they go and grab one by the tail and they put it out on the Arctic Ocean and they get a hacksaw and then just cut it up and hand me a piece. Like this is yours.
Lovely.
Yeah, and then you just shave. Yeah, exactly. And then you just shave it up and eat it. That's little salts and peppers mixed together. But one of the things can you go to the one of all of us sitting in the back of the vehicle, Phoebe? So. If I can end on this, so he tested me, and he tested me in other ways. I had to climb his 25-foot aluminum ladder on top of this vehicle, look out over the ice, and lots of little things. But by a few weeks in, he was like, Andrew, people like us need challenges. I hope you will come to North Pole next year. We're men who need challenge. I'm like, okay. But what I like, that's him sitting on the left there in the black shirt. There you've got, an amazing Russian Olympian, basically, an amazing Icelandic driver. The guy laughing is Ukrainian, and this all went down, by the way, as the conflict was happening. A Russian documentarian there in the blue, fantastic shooter. He's shot indigenous tribes across the north of Siberia. And gone into Antarctica and done a lot of shooting there. Torfi, that's the guy who called out on the radio, we're going in. And then beside me there is a mechanic from my old rally team who we got hired onto the expedition. He went the whole way with us. And then he's going to go all the way around the world with the team, and me. And in the foreground is one of the Russian technicians. It's a little English patient that it's in a way it's something finer. Like the war was happening, but we're all the nations working together, and we're in the north. By the way, Canadian North, and it's my country. I'm Canadian, but we've got Russians there. You've got Icelandics. You've got Americans. These are all of the nations that have interest in the north. Right? And I have a lot of interest in Canadian sovereignty and exclusive economic zones and so on. But when we're working together, when you're on an expedition, you're just working together. It's
you're depending on each other.
Yeah, and I trust these guys with my life. I did. Yeah. And I will. And that's what I love about it, is that it's nationless, and you all respect each other, and you support each other, and I mean, it's been a privilege to work with them. And I feel very, very lucky to be on this expedition team. And I hope that in this sort of spirit of cooperation, we can continue to all work together in the North. Everybody has
and we support adventurers like you, and thank you for coming, Andrew Picard. It was really an amazing talk. And thank you for our viewers at home. I hope you get off your ass and you come down to the Adventures Club and experience it, because it's a hell of a lot more fun in person. And I'd definitely like to thank our crew, especially Phoebe Piper, who runs our AV and volunteers every Thursday night. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So at the end of every program, we like to give out this certificate of appreciation. So if you'll meet me at the center map, our map is our